Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cooperstown, New York, site of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. We're very glad you could join us for the latest in our continuing series of virtual curator spotlights. For those who don't know who I am, my name is Bruce Markison, and today I'll be joined by Erik Strohl. Erik is the Hall's Vice President of Exhibition and Collections, and he is going to lead us through the Hank Aaron exhibit. It's called Chasing the Dream. It's up on the third floor of the museum. Certainly one of the many exhibits that we're proud here. It's beautifully done, beautifully arranged. We sometimes say it's a Hank Aaron room, but in a sense, it's really two rooms. And then there's a small alleyway between the rooms. It's a wonderfully complete exhibit on Hank Aaron's career and his life. And this, of course, a program that we are doing just a few months after Hank Aaron's passing back in January. As we get started, we do want to thank the Ford Motor Company for being our sponsor for this and all of our other virtual programs. Our thanks to go out to Ford Motor Company for making these programs possible. Erik, it's been about a year since we last talked to you. We did a virtual curator spotlight on Chasing the Dream about a year ago, this time though under different circumstances. But it's been a while. It's been about 12 months or so since we've talked online. How have you been?
I've been doing great, Bruce. Thanks. I'm glad to be here. Always love to talk about Hank Aaron, especially this day, which is, of course, like the 47th anniversary of the 715th home run, one of the most famous moments in sports history. So, always a pleasure to join you. We did a few spotlights last spring, but this was the first one, I think, and great to be back.
This is the first time, Erik, we've had a chance to talk since the passing of Hank Aaron back in January. He died at the age of 86. Tell us about that day when you heard the news. I certainly was shocked. We lost a number of Hall of Famers in recent years, but no matter how many you lose, each one is stunning and shocking in its own way. But you knew Hank especially well. Go back through that tough day. What was going through your mind when you heard the news?
Yeah, that was a tough day. And as our viewers know, it's been a tough year. We lost about 10 Hall of Famers in 10 months. And this was a Friday, and it was the Friday before we were going to do the induction announcement for whatever the potential class of 2021 was going to be. And I was actually working at home, split some time in the office and some time at home. And it was late in the morning when all of a sudden my phone started to blow up, and I'd been on another call, and I was like, oh God, what horrible news, and totally unprepared for it. Henry had not been in ill health, of course, up there in age, but was shocked to hear it, and particularly saddened. I know all of the living Hall of Famers. I've got to give orientations to, 30 to 40 of them at this point. But I knew Hank particularly well and probably spent more time with him than any other living Hall of Famer going back to the early to mid 2000s. And I got to share some special times with him. And of course, working on this exhibit was one of them. And he was a cut above. I mean, all Hall of Famers are unbelievable athletes, but Henry Aaron was just an unbelievable human being. And so it was a tough day, and just basically scrambling to figure out, what we need to do to commemorate. We do things whenever a Hall of Famer passes, but we happen to have MLB Network in Cooperstown because they were there to cover the announcement for the induction, and we were doing it in Cooperstown for the first time with COVID and remote stuff. So we kind of switched gears a little bit, and I ended up doing some special programs, and I did one with Brian Kenny for MLB. That was about 10 or 15 minutes that aired, I think it was Saturday or Sunday, the announcement. So yeah, it was a tough weekend, but always, it hurts to think about Henry being gone, but it was great to be able to celebrate him and think about him and all the wonderful things that he'd accomplished.
Well, it's tough to lose a great player and a great man like Hank Aaron. We can take some solace in the fact that for the 86 years he was with us, he remained sharp to the end. He was very aware. He still seemed to have good recollection. Just a short personal story. I mean, I didn't know him anywhere near as well as you did. You went to his house. We're going to talk about that in a few moments. But I remember, I think it was 2019 was the last time he was here for the induction.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was induction Sunday, and it was, or now actually, it might have been Saturday night after the parade. And Hank went to the Hall of Fame. There was a party that evening in the museum, as there always is on Saturday night. And I remember we were near the security office. I was working with John Horn of the photo department, and Hank Aaron was there in a wheelchair. He was not able to walk quite as well as he once did. So at times he was in a wheelchair. And we were trying to, or some folks with security were trying to get him a ride back to the Otesaga Hotel. And John and I were there, and we engaged him in some small talk. And John had said, we're going to leave you alone now. There'll be somebody to take you over to the hotel. And Hank Aaron said to John, well, why don't you guys hang out with me and talk until my ride gets here? So that was kind of cool that Hank said, hey, you stay with me and talk to me. And we didn't want to infringe, but he insisted. And it was a special moment. As it turned out, it was the last time that I personally saw Hank here in Cooperstown. Let's talk about this exhibit, Chasing the Dream. Where did the idea for this come about? How long was it in the making?
So I would say that early 2000s, we started thinking about what we needed to do to commemorate Hank Aaron's feats, not just on the field, but what he has done as a human being and his legacy. And Hank was starting to get up there in age, and we wanted to take advantage of the fact that he was still capable of moving about, and he was in relatively good health and of course sharp, as you said. And talking with my boss at the time, the former chief curator at the Hall of Fame, Ted Spencer, and we always had an exhibit for Babe Ruth, and he's the only individual baseball player who had their own exhibit at the Hall of Fame. And we came to the conclusion, and this was a group effort amongst the whole curatorial team, to decide that we really needed to do the same for Hank Aaron. If there's two baseball players who transcend the sport of baseball to become cultural icons, it's Babe Ruth and Hank Aaron. And so we decided we needed to do the same thing. And so that was the genesis of it. And from there, we communicated with Hank what we wanted to do. And then we started to go down and visit with him. So we went to Atlanta, of course, to visit with him there, to see all the things that he had in storage and things that he had at his house. The president of the Hall of Fame at that time, Jeff Adelson, and I went down and inventoried everything in his home for him, as well as all the other locations, including his office at Turner Field. And we already had an unbelievable amount of things at the Hall of Fame. He was very generous during his career, and all of the milestone stuff, which we'll get into as we talk about the exhibit, we already had at the Hall of Fame, but there was so much more that he had that touched upon his career and things that he had received over time. So we went to Atlanta, we did that, which was special. But I think the thing that was really the neatest was we went down to Mobile, and we met him in Mobile, where he's from. One of 5 Hall of Famers from Mobile, by the way, which is pretty unbelievable if you think about Mobile, the size of Mobile and where it's located in the country. And we went down there, and Hank, of course, born and grew up there, was native to a place called Down the Bay, and then grew up in Toulminville. And he first started to play baseball at Carver Park, which is the first park in Mobile for African Americans. And we got to spend time with him at his house where he grew up. And those are some of the most special times I had, I think, with him, sitting out in the front porch of his home, listening to him tell stories about what it was like growing up in Mobile and what it was like when he first started to play in the minors and would come back. And he was already a legend in his hometown, in his neighborhood. And just to listen to him tell stories was unbelievable. And we ended up consulting with the city of Mobile because they moved his childhood home. They actually lifted it, off the ground and put it on a truck, and drove it to the Mobile Bay Bears ballpark and turned it into a house museum. And the Hall of Fame consulted on that, and we helped them with the museum aspects of that and loaned them artifacts for that. But that, just one other thing that goes to show you what he meant there in Mobile. So we got to spend a lot of time with him and going back and forth to Atlanta and Mobile. And that was probably about 2007-ish or so. And then the exhibit opened in 2009, and he came. We had a huge celebration with him, his family, a lot of people connected to the Braves. And that opened in 2009, and that was a wonderful celebration. That was in, I think, about the spring of 2009.
Erik, when you were at his house and he was showing you all these different artifacts, was his attitude like, take whatever you like? Or were there a couple of items that he wanted to reserve for himself?
No, and like I said, the most prominent things we had already, but he made a point to tell us that everything I have, anything you want, you can have it.
Wow.
And to this day, he's one of the very few Hall of Famers who have done that. And it is an unbelievable gesture. And he meant it to be an example too, to other Hall of Famers and to all ball players. He's like, this is where this stuff should be. Now, we don't have all of it in our possession yet. We weren't going to go and take all the stuff out of his house while he was still living there and Billy's living there. So, we've done an agreement. It's all, it was actually signed in 2017. And so what we don't have at the Hall of Fame that is going to come to us will eventually show up. But he has donated more to us than any single individual Hall of Famer. While he's alive, there's more than 50 artifacts in this exhibit alone that he donated to us. And, I really can't think of anything that he wanted to hold back. The 715 bat and ball are not in Cooperstown right now. And we're working on that with the estate, and currently they're with the Braves, and we're going to continue to have them displayed down in Atlanta. But other than that, everything that you could think of, we have in our possession that would have any significance to his career. And that stuff is mostly on display.
When visitors come to the museum, they go up to the third floor. This is the scene that they'll view in entering Chasing the Dream. It's already full of many great photographs. It's got a video highlight of his career, including home run number 17, a lot of great artifacts. You going to have room for all these new artifacts coming in over time?
I don't know if we're going to add much to this exhibit because it is already the best of the best. So the rest of the stuff we're going to get is just tangential in terms of importance to what's already on display. But it definitely is stuff that will, fill out all the other aspects of his career, all the different types of awards he got, other sorts of ephemera related to his career. And it also allows us to have a pool of things that we can loan to other institutions, whether it's the Braves or whether it was Mobile. As I mentioned, unfortunately, the Mobile Bay Bears left Mobile, so our stuff is no longer down there. But there's opportunities for other museums to take things on loan that are in Atlanta or elsewhere, and we've already been approached by others since his passing. So it allows us to share his legacy outside of Cooperstown. So it's not just what we display, but it's the fact that we have it in Cooperstown to preserve it for all posterity, for generations from now. This stuff will be here to be able to be used in whatever way they feel is important, 100 years from now. And it's, again, an unbelievably generous thought that he wanted this stuff shared, not to be on someone's mantelpiece at home, but to be available for others to enjoy.
Erik, you mentioned that the exhibit officially opened back in 2009. Hank Aaron was here for a ceremony. What was his initial reaction when he saw it?
Oh, he was blown away. I mean, certainly, I wouldn't know what it's like for somebody to do an exhibit about my life and career, but he was pleased because I think not just we tried to make a concerted effort that this exhibit wasn't just about his greatness on the field, which is, indisputable. There's no question that he's one of the greatest baseball players that ever lived, but also what he did off the field and his legacy off the field. And we'll get to that as we move through the exhibit. But so basically, giving the picture of him as a full man. And I can't tell you, anyone who's ever had the chance to meet Hank Aaron, there's a few words I think that I hear repeated over and over. And one is dignity, dignified, and another one is humble. It's not the brash pomp and circumstance that you see in a lot of today's athletes, not just in baseball, but in other sports, and, always working for the video highlights and all this stuff. Hank went about his job every day, perhaps the most consistent baseball player who ever lived. And that's just part of his legacy. But I think he was pleased because it was more about him, the man, than just him, the player.
We're going to look at some of the images, some of the artifacts that are contained in the exhibit. I want to start with this great photograph of a very young Henry Aaron. And this was taken on the day that he left home to play with the Indianapolis Clowns, a Negro Leagues team at the time. Erik, as you look at this photograph and also the caption, which was essentially written by Hank Aaron, what strikes you most about it?
Well, he looks unbelievably young, right? He's 18 there, but he looks like he's maybe 15. And it says there, the day I left from Mobile, Alabama to play ball with the Clowns. And by the way, he signed a contract, I think it was for $200, and ended up playing with them for about 3 months. But his mom was so upset that she couldn't come to the train station to see him off. She gave him a couple sandwiches, a couple dollars for his pocket, and waved him off to the station. And as he noted, it was the first time that he said he'd ever been around white people, that train ride. And I think it was to Winston-Salem to go to spring training with the Clowns. And he was with them for about 3 months when he was signed by the Braves, and the Dodgers and the Braves actually were both going after him. You didn't have to look at Henry Aaron very long to realize that you wanted to sign him. And in fact, one of the scouts for the Braves said, "I think this kid could be the answer." And well, that's pretty pathetic.
There's some irony here, Erik. The Clowns were known for putting on these demonstrations, showboating, if you will, in between innings. That was part of their shtick. That was part of their image. And that was not Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron was not a showboat. He was not that kind of a player, but yet he somehow fit in.
Yeah. And at this point, this is the Negro Leagues are going through their kind of death knell after integration with Jackie Robinson, and all the best players are starting to move over to the regular major leagues. And at this point, the Clowns are just a traveling team. They don't actually play home games in Indianapolis. And you're right. There was an element of their team at this point that was it was almost thinking like basketball comparison would be the Harlem Globetrotters, where it's very much you're putting on a show. And a lot of sleight of hand tricks and other stuff going on besides the actual game on the field. But Henry Aaron, he was an infielder early in his career, played shortstop and then second base with the Braves in the minor leagues. And I think they knew something when they saw it. And it was very close because he almost signed with I'm sorry, I think I said the Dodgers before, it was the Giants, and he almost signed, and it would have been him and Willie Mays on the same team. Could you imagine that? But the Braves offered him $50 more in terms of salary, so he went with the Braves, and was sold for $10,000, by the way, and probably that was $100,000 in dollars then. For someone who's making $200 a month, they realized what his actual value was to the team, and that was a ridiculous amount of money to sign a 18-year-old kid.
When the Braves acquired him, they were still technically the Boston Braves, but they were on the verge of moving to Milwaukee. And they ended up assigning him to his first minor league team, which was in Wisconsin, a town called Eau Claire. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, and you can see a signed baseball there. And there's a quote from Henry Aaron. Wisconsin was like a foreign country to an 18-year-old black kid from Alabama. There was nothing in my experience that prepared me for living around white people. He had a couple of African-American teammates that were with him there in Eau Claire, and they stayed with families in town. And certainly it's not anything he was used to in terms of the climate of like living in the Deep South. And so I think it just was an eye opener for him that there's, different places in the country are totally different in terms of their environment and the people that are there and their behavior and how they react. And he certainly wasn't, I think, used to anything like that. But He played well. He won Rookie of the Year, and that's a Class C Northern League at that time. And that was just the end of 52. He played there just a few months because he had started out with Indianapolis, and then of course moves up to Class A the next year with Jacksonville.
We see the baseball on the left-hand side of the screen, and it's actually signed by Aaron and some of his teammates. Looks like it's either a red or a brownish color pen that was used to sign. I'm curious, Erik, in terms of the racial treatment that he got in Wisconsin. You know, he's coming from the Jim Crow South. The North was better, but, you know, there were still elements of Jim Crow in the northern part of the country. How was he treated in general from a racial perspective?
I think mostly welcoming. I think for people in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, you don't see too many African-American players, Black players on your minor league team. That was something new for them as well. Wherever you go, you're going to have an element of people who are not happy about that. So he would certainly, you know, hear people in the stands, but not at all like the environment you would have had in the Deep South. So I think that I think it was an eye opener for him that there are places in the country, in the world, that are not like where I grew up, and that people in different places are different.
Then comes the South Atlantic League, and this is especially interesting because Aaron becomes a history-making player there. It was a league that did not have Black players prior to 1953. So Hank Aaron is essentially integrating this league, and that's incredibly difficult, and yet he plays like an MVP.
Yeah, absolutely. He was the MVP of the South Atlantic League that year. And I mean, first of all, think about this dichotomy. You're going from Eau Claire, Wisconsin to Jacksonville, Florida. You couldn't find two things more polar opposite in terms of the racial environment, right? And so certainly something that he's more used to, but you're seeing a ring there. They won the regular season title, and he was one of, I think it was 5 players that desegregated the South Atlantic League that year, and he was one of them. You can see the label there. It says he led the league in runs, hits, doubles, RBI, and batting average. And in fact, one sports writer commented that Hank Aaron led the league in everything except hotel accommodations, which you know, is a pretty poignant remark.
Interesting ring that we see on display here. We tend to associate rings with major leaguers who have won world championships. This is actually given out by his team for finishing first in the regular season standings. Pretty nice.
Yeah, and that's you know, Class A, which was like AAA now. You know, so it's getting towards the highest or close to the highest level, you know, to show you what Hank Aaron thinks of making sure the Hall of Fame has all this stuff. It's like, yeah, I want you to have all my minor league things too. You need to have everything that is about my career.
Yeah, it really completes the picture. Here we have one section, one wall of the exhibit, and it shows, among other things, toward the right side of the photo, a pile of bricks. Tell us about those.
Well, when we went to Mobile, we wanted to bring something back from Mobile that was a part of Mobile, part of his house. And so those bricks actually come from a part, not the main house itself, but there was, you know, there was a driveway and a garage and a kind of a porch area. So we got some bricks. What we really wanted was the mailbox. His mother had passed away at this point, but the house was still there before it had been moved to the ballpark. And in fact, Henry was like that, you know, that would be a great thing to take. But when we got to the house, that had already been taken by somebody, you know, so some passerby or some person in Mobile decided that they wanted to appropriate that for themselves. So that was no longer there, but we did get some bricks to bring back. And I think your next photo, Bruce, shows the porch post, and we brought back a porch post from the house as well. So, and Henry was excited about that, to have a piece of the house that his parents built as part of the exhibit, even if it wasn't extant, even if it wasn't the original house as built, perhaps in the 30s or 40s, whenever they built it, but it was part of that part of his youth, and definitely a direct link to his family and his parents.
Pretty large porch post. Might not have been that easy to bring back with you.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
You never know what you're going to collect, right? You know, you go down there, you think you're going to get bats and balls, and you come back with bricks and porch posts. So you
Yeah.
never know.
Let's go back to the previous photograph. We talked about the bricks. You also mentioned the train station photograph. There's a photo of him with the Indianapolis Clowns. Tell us about some of the other smattering of photos that we see here.
Well, I think there's one with Jacksonville there in the upper left, right? And then the one next to the portrait of him kind of just gazing off, I believe that's from Puerto Rico. So after Jacksonville, this would have been after the 53 season, the 53-54 Winter League season in Puerto Rico. He went and played with Caguas. And that's where he actually was switched from being an infielder to an outfielder. And that's also where they worked on his batting stance. Mickey Owen was the manager of the Caguas team. And in fact, there's only three baseballs that were hit for home runs over the fence at their home park that Winter League. Stan Lepata hit one and Hank Aaron hit the other two. And another thing about, which deserves some mention, and that is those people who might know about Hank Aaron's youth or his early career. You know, he grew up with nothing in Mobile, and so learned to play baseball. He didn't have baseball bats and baseballs with a broom handle and bottle caps, and would spend hours swinging broom handles to people at bottle caps that were being pitched to him, and he developed an untraditional batting grip. So if you're a right-handed batter, your right hand's on top and your left hand's below. But his grip was cross-handed. Mm. And so when he came up, and I'm sure this was a total shock to the scouts, after the Braves signed him, they worked on getting his grip switched back to the way it should be as a right-handed hitter. But, when you're self-taught, you can only imagine what his power was and how things changed when he actually started to hit the correct way.
It's amazing. Most of us, if we tried to hit cross-handed, we break our wrists. Right. And his wrists, of course, were incredibly strong. In those early years with the Braves, really his rookie season in large part came about because of an injury to Bobby Thompson, the veteran outfielder. He got hurt in the spring. Hank Aaron was able to move into the opening day starting lineup and was essentially able to stay part of that Braves outfield, not only for the rest of that year, but for the next number of seasons as well. And that brings us up to 1957, certainly a hallmark season. Here we have another ring, not a minor league ring, but this is his 1957 World Series ring. The Milwaukee Braves defeat the Yankees in a classic 7-game title. Tell us about this ring and what it must have meant to Aaron to give this to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think we got this in the late 80s after he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, but he gave us a bunch of stuff, and I think it was 1988 that he wanted us to have. And I'll tell you right now, as working as a curator at the Hall of Fame for, I think it's about 23 years now, it's very, very exceedingly rare to get World Series rings and to get awards. Those are the things that players keep the most. Bats, balls, equipment, and stuff is much easier to get. But if you're going to hold on to something that you're going to keep in your family or pass on, it's really the jewelry and the awards, which are unique, right? Because there's only going to be one of them per event. And 57, I wanted to bring up something. Before you get to the World Series, they were in a tight pennant race in 1957, and he had always said that he had wanted to have a moment that was like Bobby Thompson. And interestingly enough, as you pointed out, Bobby Thompson's injury in spring training of 54 really allowed Hank to make that opening day roster and become a major leaguer for the first time. Well, in 57, in basically the pennant clinching game, Hank Aaron gets the game-winning hit and is carried basically off the field like Bobby Thompson was when he hit his shot heard around the world. So there's this kind of cool parallel, and we have a photo in the exhibit of him being carried off the field. And he had said that the baseball moments he could think of, that was one that he cherished, and he got to experience that himself. Of course, that propelled them then to the World Series where they beat the vaunted Yankees, and he gave us that ring. He also got his hard to believe only MVP award that year, which is right there. and which he also donated to the hall. And we have all of the biggest milestone and important things for him, and most important awards for him. We have his World Series ring. We have his MVP award. He won 2 batting titles in 56 and 59. We have both of those silver bats. He won 3 Gold Gloves, 1958 through 1960. We have all 3 of his Gold Gloves. And so that stuff's all kind of on display in this area. And this is all, a testament to that main part of his career where he is building these numbers, that he becomes the leader in everything. I mean, you think about what he had, his numbers when he retired. First in home runs, of course, at the time. First in RBI, first in extra base hits, first in total bases. He's still first in all of those. And in fact, if you asked Henry which one was most important to him, he said total bases, because, bases are the thing, right? You add up bases, you're going to win. He's also got enough hits, 30,771 hits. You take away all of his home runs, he still has more than 3,000 hits. He's the first player to have 3,000 hits and 500 home runs. That's a list that's now 6 people long. When he retired, he had about 25 major league or national league career hitting records. During his career, he had probably more than 40 times he led the league in different individual categories. Just staggering. And after he passed away, MLB was doing a lot of interviews with everybody you could think of, right, that wanted to talk about Henry Aaron. And I do remember listening to George Will speak about Henry, and he put it very well when he said that when Henry Aaron retired in 1976, he had the record for the most records held. And so that testament to who he is, and we have a lot of stuff from the career of Henry, that those numbers that he built that you can see testify to that in the exhibit.
Hank Aaron was really a victim of his own consistency, sort of like Mike Trout. Mike Trout is great every year. I mean, nothing really distinguishes one year from another. The statistics are outstanding, but they're similar every year. Aaron was the same way. And it's almost like when the voters, in this case, the National League MVP award, they're looking at Hank Aaron. Well, it's a typically great year for Aaron, but we've got to find a new narrative. We've got to give it to somebody who maybe surprised a little bit. And then at the end of his career, you realize you only gave him 1 MVP award. Maybe he should have gotten a few more.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I think when the amazing becomes commonplace, you forget that how amazing it is. So, he had 20 consecutive seasons with 20 home runs. Any player now would give anything to be able to do that. Averaged 33 home runs a season throughout his career. He had more than 30 home runs 15 times, but yet here's the man who hit 755 home runs, and he never hit 50 home runs in a season. So again, just the mind-boggling consistency, I think, is the word that I use in one of the text panels there in the exhibit.
Erik, let's talk about this exhibit case, which features an array of milestone artifacts. We see several bats, several balls, and also an award in the background of the case too. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so we've got the bat, the ball, and the cap that's in the upper right for the 600th home run. And then we've got the bat and ball from the 3,000th hit and the bat and ball from the 500th home run. All, again, amazing milestones. And you can see in the background there, that's the Phi Delta Theta Award for Lou Gehrig, which is given out every year by Gehrig's fraternity from Columbia. Ernie Banks also won that award. The upper left is a photo. It's hard to see with the reflection there of Ernie Banks shaking, coming out and congratulating Henry, because I think they must have been playing the Cubs the day that he was given that honor. Again, just one of countless honors that he received.
Moving ahead now, and for a lot of people, including me, this is in some ways the piece de resistance. This, of course, is one of the artifacts from a moment that really motivated us to do this program today. It is April 8th, 2021. And it is 47 years after what happened on that date in 1974, when Hank Aaron hit home run number 715. We have the complete uniform from that game. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, and the first thing that strikes you when you look at it is like, oh my God, that doesn't look very large. And I know you hear people say it a lot, but players were not the size that they are today. If you think about the strength and conditioning and the nutrition and the regimens and just all of the assets that a team has and the money they can put into making somebody a top tier athlete and just a physical specimen, it just wasn't thought of that way, right? Throughout his career, and this, of course, coming from the early 70s. But to have that piece that he wore and ran around the bases, and we'll look at that famous image momentarily. That was an event unparalleled, and as Vin Scully said, and he called that a moment, to have a black man break Babe Ruth's home record in the Deep South was just an interesting moment in American history, right? And obviously the civil rights movement still going on, having started and really heating up in the 60s. But what he was doing is all part of what's going on in this country culturally regarding that. And his former teammate, Eddie Matthews, was the manager of the Braves at that game. And still, I believe, the leader in terms of total career home runs among teammates. I don't think anybody's could be close. And there's a quote up there on the wall. I'm not sure if you guys can read it, but it says something like, I don't know where Hank Aaron, it's hard to read, but the sentiment is
I think I can read it for you. I don't know where Hank Aaron will break Ruth's record, but I can tell you one thing. 10 years from the day he hits it, 3 million people will say they were there.
Yeah, right. That's one of those things where I'm sure that's happened. I'm sure millions of people said they were there. Yeah. That home run, of course, goes over left field wall into the bullpen, is caught on the fly by relief pitcher Tom House, who was their best reliever that year. Bill Buckner's playing left field for the Dodgers and had climbed the wall, and has actually said to House, can I have the ball? Give me the ball. Of course, House did not give it to him. He kept the ball and then presented it to Henry Aaron at home plate. And I think Tom jokes that the only thing he ever received for giving the ball back was, I think, a local company gave him a television or something like that. House, of course, goes on to become one of the most famous pitching coaches of all time, credited by Nolan Ryan in his Hall of Fame speech for having helped him tremendously, and considered by many to be the father of modern pitching mechanics, and actually works with NFL quarterbacks as well. So just an interesting history there, but all sorts of elements that are just kind of coincidental. I think Al Downing's number was 44 as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting, Eric, this is one of the few artifacts in the museum that you can see from a 360-degree angle. It can actually be seen from an exhibit behind Chasing the Dream.
Yeah, and we did that on purpose. So Chasing the Dream and the exhibit behind it is called One for the Books, which is about, it's about the history of records and what are considered records and why are they different now, and in terms of what they were then, and how do things evolve and change in terms of the game and what you count, how you count it, all those different types of things. But they're all part of the Hank Aaron Gallery. So that was the intent when we opened this exhibit, was that the Hank Aaron Gallery would be not just the exhibit dedicated to Henry Aaron's career and life, Chasing the Dream, but it would also be the exhibit One for the Books, which is dedicated to records and numbers and statistics in all of baseball. And that seemed only appropriate. So when you were in that other exhibit, you can also see this uniform, and there's a label on the other side, so you also know what it is.
There's still a lot more to see in Chasing the Dream. There's a wonderful blow up of this photograph. I refer to them as Aaron's two visitors, or ballpark escorts, as he made his way around second base. There's a great story behind this.
Yes, there is. Now, the photographer is a guy named Ron Sherman. I want to make sure to give him credit. And we were contacted by him, I in the last couple of years. And it took about 40 years for him to get proper credit for this photo. There was probably more than 100 photographers at that game at Fulton County Stadium that day.
Mm-hmm.
And there are countless images of him hitting that home run, right, at home plate when he's swinging and then he connects. And we've all seen those, both black and white and color. But Ron was like, I'm just going to keep my camera going. So he just kept taking photos the whole time. And this ended up becoming as much of an iconic shot as anything, and one that others did not get. And it shows two young guys, and you may not know how old they are just looking at the photo. They're in high school. They're 17-year-old kids there. And they jump out of the stands from the first base side. And, of course, if you did that now, you'd get tased. But they make it a lot farther than you could ever make it today. And this image of, two young white guys, clapping him on the back and congratulating. And he was taken by surprise, of course, not sure what to expect. And, quickly realized that they were celebrating and not there in any other capacity. But these kids knew they were going to be in big trouble. So after they were rounding second to third, they peeled off and ran towards the third base line and tried to climb into the stands. One of them got caught before he got over the railing. The other one got about 10 rows up and realized there was no way he was getting any further. Security had blocked off the stair. And so they were arrested and taken to jail. One of their fathers had to bail them out about 3:30 in the morning. And they went to court the next day and the charges were dropped. But Henry maintained some contact with them over the years. I know when, I'm not sure if it was probably about a decade ago, they had a reunion celebrating this event, and they were there and able to see Henry again. One of them became an optometrist, I believe, in Georgia, and the other one became involved in real estate in South Carolina. And one of them, I believe, has passed away now, but the other one is around. In fact, I saw an interesting note that he had written after Henry's passing, just talking about, what Henry meant, and in today's times of division and all sorts of vitriol and everything else that's going on in the country and politics. In a moment then when there was also unrest, the way Henry handled himself and what he did was so the opposite of the way so many people are dealing with stuff now, that it's something to look at and admire. And hopefully we can take a lesson from.
Tells you what an amazing man he was. He was forgiving, and he essentially became friendly with these two young gentlemen. It's incredible. Here we have an exhibit, or part of the exhibit, that looks at this whole chase of Babe Ruth, which was incredibly stressful for Henry Aaron. Tell us about some of the items featured here, Erik.
Yeah, so that's the whole wall of, and this part of the exhibit's called Chasing Ruth. And in 1973, approaching the end of the 73 season, there was many thought that he might be able to do it before the end of the year, and then of course didn't. And having to wait a whole off season, can imagine how agonizing that was for Henry. And a lot has always been made about what was going on and the amount of anger and negative mail that he received. And, Henry always was just even keel. And I think he was even shocked about what was occurring. He was as famous as anyone in the country. You could write a letter to Henry. You could draw a picture of a hammer on the envelope, put a stamp on it, and it would end up to him in Atlanta. The U.S. Post Office estimated he got more than 1 million pieces of mail during that time he was chasing Ruth. The president of the United States is the only person who received more mail. And a lot of that mail was as positive as well. So we'll talk about the mail in a minute, but he received both positive and negative. And here's some other things from that event. You can see a certificate that was handed out to fans, 715, that they got at the stadium. That's the third base that he stepped on as he was rounding the bases for 715. Those are some media guides from 73 and 74 that featured him on the cover, of course. And there's that batting order card. And I think you got a close-up of that. And that, of course, is what they would hand the home plate umpire. You can see the lineup there with Ralph Garr and Darrell Evans, Henry batting cleanup, Dusty Baker batting fifth, Davey Johnson. Baker and Johnson, of course, go on to unbelievable managing careers as well. And then the handwritten notation there at the bottom in blue ink, Hank Aaron's 715th home run. I know that you like this piece too, Bruce. Is there a particular reason why it speaks to you?
There's a couple of things. I assume it was filled out by Eddie Matthews, the manager. And at the bottom, he doesn't sign it Eddie Matthews. He just puts Matthews as the manager's signature. His handwriting is actually very neat. We put this up on our Facebook page today, and people were marveling at Eddie Matthews' penmanship. So I think that's pretty cool. I've always been curious about who wrote Hank Aaron's 715th home run, because that is in blue ink, and it looks like different handwriting from Eddie Matthews. I don't know if we've ever been able to figure out who wrote that, but that kind of notation I think is pretty cool too.
Yeah, it is. I don't know, Bruce, and I think I've never actually compared that. That could be Henry himself. Now, that's not something you would think he would do, right? Because he was not one to call attention to himself. Only reason I say that is the double A in Aaron does look a little bit like his signature. I'm doing this just from memory. I'd have actually, get Aaron's signature and compare it. But regardless, I'm not sure if we'll ever be able to figure that out. But a great piece. And, it's one thing to have bats and balls and gloves. They last the test of time. Paper's a lot more transitory, a lot, easily damaged and thrown away and disposed of. So paper is something that we, of course, have the Hall of Fame and keep and conserve and preserve differently than other artifacts. But one of the most important batting order cards we have, if not the most.
Erik, also, it's a batting card that we use in our unit on civil rights here at the Hall of Fame. We illustrate this and we talk about some of the difficulties that Hank Aaron faced as he approached the record. And that brings us to our next subject. He did receive, both in 1973 and early in 74, an incredible amount of correspondence. Some of it was good. A lot of it was negative. Here we have a letter of encouragement shown in this case.
That's the one in the upper left, and you'll need to come to the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown if you want to read that. That's a more modern letter written by a man named Dr. Jeffrey Young, and he wanted to let Henry know that when his son was born, again, this is a bit more than a decade ago, but this is not period of the 70s, that he named him after Henry Aaron because of what Henry meant to him. And what he thought that the symbol to Henry was for this country. And we still correspond with Dr. Young a lot, and he was at the opening of this exhibit, and we stay in touch with him. So that's just one piece of good mail. I'd like to point out that when we asked Henry, we didn't have any hate mail in the collection, and we knew this was an important thing that needed to be seen because it was part of this moment. And a part of the history and culture of this moment, and said a lot about what was going on in the country. And it was Ted Spencer who had gone down and asked him for a piece. This was when we were doing our traveling exhibit, Baseball's America, which traveled around the country. And we had a case that we wanted to talk about this sort of thing. And Ted was talking with him, and he could tell that Henry was looking very uncomfortable. And Henry and Billy had saved this because they knew it was important to be saved, not that because you want it, but because you need to have a record of history of what occurred. And he eventually said to Ted, I'll lend you a piece of hate mail, but you cannot display it without displaying a piece of positive mail, because I don't want people to dwell on the negative. The negative story is so easy to harp on. But for every piece of negative mail, he received the same amount or more positive mail. So he wants people to know that it was not just that story that we all focus on, but you can see the positive in the upper left, and then the negative, Bruce, if you want to go to the next one there, is a handwritten note. And I can read it very quickly. It's horrible. And he often didn't open these or read them. There was staff at the Braves who did, because he just needed to remain focused, right? But this is a transcription of that handwritten one. It says, "Hank Aaron, are you trying to show off for your new girlfriend? You must think people are dumb. We know you're trying to break Babe Ruth's record. You dirty old expletive man. We hope you don't We hope you don't this year. In 1973 will be too damn old to ever do it. We, our club, wish you had luck, all the bad luck. If you think we should honor you, hell no, you old slob. Playing ball is better than picking cotton and eating grits. And that's just, amazingly repulsive. I would also note it's got about 6 spelling errors, so I think that goes to show the intelligence of the person writing this letter.
Yeah.
But just one example, you don't need to see anything more than one to understand what he was receiving. But again, he made sure that we would show positive too, because it was as much or more people supporting him than weren't.
You're absolutely right. The grammatically poor nature of the letter says volumes in this case. Another great part of this exhibit is Hank Aaron's locker, and this one taken from Atlanta Fulton County Stadium.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of lockers. In fact, most of the ones we do are Yankee Stadium lockers. I'm sure that's not a surprise, right? We've got Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and DiMaggio. And so this may be on display. I think there's another. I think we have perhaps one from Griffith Stadium that might have been Walter Johnson's. I don't know if we know specifically it was Walter Johnson's. Anyway, we've got this one here for Aaron from Fulton County. It's a great photo op. Of course, it's not a photo op during COVID. So you see the barrier there. I just took this with my phone the other day. But it allows you to see what it was like in a clubhouse in 1974. If you would walk today's player into a clubhouse from 1974, you'd think he was on another planet. The luxury and comfort with which these players live today is mind-blowing compared to what the players used to experience.
We have just a couple of other images to look at, and then we do have a couple of questions to squeeze in. The exhibit does not just focus on Aaron's youth and his playing days, but also his post-playing career. We see that here.
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, Bruce, that case is for his post-playing days. And, the impact that Henry had as a person, as a executive, as a civil rights ambassador, as a baseball ambassador, as a philanthropist is just amazing. And so almost immediately upon retirement, he became involved with player personnel with the Braves, eventually becoming a senior vice president with the Braves, one of the first African-American executives in the major leagues. He started chasing the Dream Foundation with his wife, Billy, in 1994, which has gone on to give away millions and millions of dollars to disadvantaged youth to follow their dreams. Something that the foundation is strong and doing well today, and will continue to exist moving forward. As an ambassador to baseball, I think you could see anytime, anywhere he went. If he was in public, he was at the World Series. He's always with either the current commissioner or the former commissioner with Bud Selig. They, of course, were very close with their ties with Milwaukee. And Henry, wherever he went, he had this air about him, and I tell you, you could tell all you needed to go was go to Hall of Fame induction. And I've been to 23 of them or so. And again, the greatest players who've ever lived. And Henry walks into the room, and it's another tier. You could see the reverence and awe with which all the other Hall of Famers look at him. And that was, it's not to be lost on you as an observer, I'll tell you. There you see his presidential medals, and he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Bush and the Presidential Citizens Medal from Clinton. And they are the two highest honors, civilian honors, that anyone can receive. I'm not sure how many civilians have received both. It's got to be a very, very short list. And again, something that he wanted us to have. And so we have them on display, just, culminating with a life of unbelievable generosity and dignity in terms of what he brought our country and our nation.
If you've never seen these medals up close, I mean, they are spectacular, very ornate. Eric, we have just a couple of minutes left, but we do have some questions from our audience. So let's go to the chat room from Rob Mann. He asks, given all that Aaron went through, what regrets, if any, did Hank have before he passed? Anything like that he might have expressed to you, or maybe others, interviews that you heard?
Um, no, I did not have any discussions with him in that regard. I have to say, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think there's anything Henry did that he would have done differently. He always said you get make the most with what you have and the opportunities you have, and I think he lived that to the fullest extent that you could imagine. Taking advantage of his celebrity and doing so much more with it, something so much more important than just people playing a game on a field. And the way that he carried himself through all the stuff, both good and bad, I don't think he would have any regrets on how that happened. Um, I don't know if there is anything that I certainly haven't heard him say anything, didn't say anything to me, and I haven't heard him say that in interviews. Maybe we all have some personal regrets, and so he certainly may have had some in that regard. But um, I don't know of any that I could think of. That's a good question.
Here's kind of an amusing remark from Victor. A great presentation, but I got to go. Medical appointment. So, Victor, we hope that you realize we did tape this so you can watch the balance of the program. We hope your medical appointment went well. Let's see. Stephen writes a comment. Visited the hall 2 weeks ago. This was a great exhibit. So that's certainly some praise for what
Thank you,
Erik and
Stephen.
his curatorial staff have done. Martin wants to know, did Henry have any kind of relationship with fellow Mobile athlete Willie Mays?
They had, well, Willie wasn't one of the ones from Mobile.
He wasn't.
But of course, he came from the Deep South as well, right? So the five Mobile Hall of Famers were Satchel Paige, Willie McCovey, Billy Williams, and Ozzie Smith, who was born there but didn't grow up there. But back to it's not so important to his question. The question is what sort of relationship did he have with Willie? So I think anybody who grew up watching that era of baseball and up until the point where Henry passed away in January, I think no doubt people would say the two greatest living ball players were Henry Aaron and Willie Mays. They had a collegial relationship. A competitive one, though, right? They both knew they were two of the best players that were alive at the same time and competing against one another in the same league. They both played in 24 All-Star games. Henry was actually was elected to 25 or made 25 teams, played in 24 games. And they played in the outfield together in a number of those All-Star games. So I think they had a great amount of admiration and respect for one another, but the healthy competition that athletes of their caliber have also meant that they had a lot of, respect, but also, I want to go out and I want to beat this guy. So, I don't know of any private moments that they had, and I'm sure that perhaps in Willie's books and Henry's books, they talk a little bit more about the relationship, and they did spend some time away from the game as well in different events.
I don't believe they ever played in Winter League together, but as you said, they were often teammates in the All-Star game for the National League. Typically, it was Mays in center and Hank Aaron in right, and that was pretty much a staple throughout much of the 1960s and early 70s. We have one final question, Erik. It comes in from Vinny. Did Hank ever have any scary close encounters racially while playing? I think what Vinny is getting at, anything that might have happened during a game in terms of an incident, sort of like what Jackie Robinson went through in terms of maybe being spiked or hearing threats from fans in the crowd. To your knowledge, anything like that happen?
I'm not familiar enough with the day-to-day story. It's been a while since I've read a couple of his biographies / autobiographies. Suffice it to say, yes, if you were an African American player playing in that era, you would get that both from fans on the field and from certain opponents. Not that anyone necessarily would try to injure you, but you could tell that there were definitely players who were not happy about you being out there on the field, would take any chance they could say to get you off your game. Certainly a lot of verbal stuff going on, and that was just part of the course back then. And, particularly, I think you see that too in the Deep South. So when you move from Milwaukee to Atlanta, I think Henry realized what a moment was that he could seize because of what's going on in the civil rights movement, that he could make a difference when he went to Atlanta, but also what he was going to face on and off the field was going to be a lot more different than what he was facing in Milwaukee. And going back to his earliest days, he would, his memoirs talk about how the feelings that he had. When he was with Indianapolis and they traveled just that 3 months. I think they were in Washington, D.C. and we're in a restaurant and we're taken out to a separate part of the restaurant so that they weren't allowed to sit with the white people. And after their meal was finished, they could hear the people in the kitchen smashing all the plates that they had eaten off of in the back room. And Henry's comment was something to the fact that, if dogs would have ate off those plates, they would have washed them. And that story always stuck with me. That, of course, we're talking mid-50s, and I believe it was Washington. But that was a moment from within the first few months of him leaving home, right? So that's something I'm sure he got used to throughout his entire career. Maybe not to that extent, but elements of that.
Final question, Eric. Going to venture out of the Chasing the Dream exhibit for just a moment. This is the plaque, and the day that Hank passed away, there was a floral wreath put up on the plaque, as we do for all fallen Hall of Famers. There was also a display board with a biography of Hank Aaron in tribute to him. When you first saw the plaque after his passing, what'd you think?
That we lost a great human being. Everyone talks about Hall of Famer, and I think of him as a Hall of Fame human being, not a Hall of Fame player. And when we put that up as soon as we could, in terms of get the wreath together and get the copy made and print the graphic. I did go down there before we opened and just kind of stood there and looked at it, and thought about the great times that I had. And I'll cherish those for the rest of my life, in terms of what the time I got to spend with him. So as meaningful as I've got to spend with anybody in my tenure at the Hall of Fame. And we're going to miss him. We are definitely going to miss him. But his legacy lives on in this exhibit and will live on as long as the Hall of Fame exists on this planet. We will celebrate the life and legacy of Henry Aaron.
Eric, some beautiful and poignant remembrances of the great Henry Aaron. We do appreciate your time joining us on this anniversary of maybe the most historic home run in baseball history. April 8th, 1974, Aaron hits the home run against Al Downing, breaks a record once thought invincible, once held by the great Babe Ruth. Eric, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure, Bruce. My pleasure. Everybody, come and visit us in Cooperstown and come see the exhibit, and we hope to see you soon.
Our thanks go out to Erik Strohl. Also, our thanks to our sponsor, Ford Motor Company, for making these programs possible throughout 2021. We hope you enjoyed this fond remembrance of Hank Aaron through his Chasing the Dream exhibit. Have a great day, everybody.